Thank you for joining us this morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out on such a dreary Wednesday.
I feel like you have such a fascinating point of view into the economy with so many, diverse issues represented in franchise. What has been the broader takeaway from the franchising community, especially after the election?
Yeah, so the franchise business model is 800,000 locations, nearly 9 million jobs. We're 3.5% of private sector GDP, and people tend to think of us as restaurants and fast food, but that's only 40% of the franchise economy. So you think about whether it's dog walking services or your UPS store in your community, these are the people and individuals and brands that make up the franchise model. And in terms of our feeling post-election, a month or so later, I think that if there's one thing that the country said that they wanted more of, it was more opportunity and growth. And there's nothing that the franchise community delivers to this country more than opportunity and growth. To go into business for yourself, but not by yourself. And the opportunity that the president-elect, I think, projected that as something that individuals in this country felt like things were costing more, there was less opportunity, there was sort of a burden of regulations. So those are some of the things our members are very excited about changing course on.
Great. To build on that, looking forward to 2025, to continue that momentum of growth around franchising, what is biggest policy priority for the administration and new Congress?
Yeah, I would say two big areas. Number one is around deregulation, and number two is the opportunity for certainty around tax reform. So most franchise businesses, whether you're the brand side or the individual business owner, are pass-through businesses. So every single person in franchising who is an individual tax filer is going to see a tax increase absent Congress taking action to extend expired or expiring deductions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act before the end of the 2025. On the deregulatory side, we've been facing a number of costly and burdensome regulations, many on the labor agenda side. So at DOL, the National Labor Relations Board, the joint employer rule is the number one issue that's been impacting the franchise business model, which sort of turns our business model into franchisees and franchisors being essentially one business. Takes that individual owner, so Bennett's, local Dunkin' Donuts in the great state of Maine, you are no longer essentially in charge of your own business. The brand now would be responsible for the labor and employment at your location. What's the point of franchising if you no longer have that opportunity to own and control that business entity? So we want to put an end to that in this next administration. A number of issues at the Federal Trade Commission that we're concerned about. We're excited about Commissioner Ferguson just last night being elevated to the chair role, and look forward to a change in the regime and the focus of the FTC overreaching and getting back to its core mission of protecting consumers and updating sensible regulations like the FTC's franchise rule, which is long overdue and helps brands present their franchise offering to those potential new franchise owners in a modern form.
Got it. That's great. Two follow-up questions there. First, you mentioned a bit about that franchise model and some of the challenges coming into that model. Tell us more about that, and what are some of the most common misconceptions about franchising, and how do you address those kind of misconceptions or concepts of how franchising works in your role?
Yeah, I think the first I would say is franchising is not big business, right? It's small business. We have 1,300 member brands at the IFA. Yes, of course, we have some of the most iconic brands that everybody in this room and watching online has heard of, whether it's McDonald's or the UPS store or Hilton Hotels. But brands that are outside the food or hospitality space, let's say. So a Woofie's, right? It's a dog walking service based out in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Stretch Zone, which is helping people get more healthy and deal with the rigor of their daily lives, right? And make you feel healthier in your life. And so franchising is not just big business, it's not just fast food. Those are probably the biggest misperceptions. And the stories of these individuals that own franchises in communities, that's the power of what our business model and what our association really tries to bring to life every day. So appreciate opportunities with events like Semafor and the work we do on Capitol Hill and in the States to help bring those stories to lives. Congresswoman Van Duyne, who will be here shortly, is the co-chair of the Congressional Franchise Caucus. We've done numerous events down in Irving with brands that are headquartered in Texas with the Congresswoman. So connecting those individuals, those real people in some of the most forgotten places in this country with lawmakers to understand the opportunity that franchising creates, again, to help people go into business for themselves, but not by themselves.
That's great. And your example, I think, is such an interesting to think about the sort of two-side of the economic opportunity of franchising, of both those small business owners with local success who can use the franchising model to scale nationally, as well as those folks who can invest in franchises themselves and become those scaled, local business owners. It's really fascinating to think about the two pieces of that. You mentioned, Commissioner Ferguson with the FTC pick. I just wanted to kind of zoom out around that. Of President-elect Trump's picks for top administration jobs, have you been surprised or particularly excited about any of those other picks as these have been rolling out?
Yeah, look, the president-elect put together a very broad and diverse coalition. He reached into constituencies that are traditionally thought of as Democratic constituencies, whether it's minorities or working class Americans, members of labor unions. So we're excited again about the opportunity for growth and the opportunity for more business ownership opportunity through deregulation and tax relief. When you think about some of the most important agencies for the IFA, I mentioned the FTC and Commissioner Ferguson, but I'd also mention Representative Lori Chavez DeRaymer, which there's been some controversy over her selection as the Secretary of Labor. And frankly, we're very excited about Lori's opportunity to bring workers and business together to advance what the president-elect said he wanted to deliver to America. And I think oftentimes we've seen a changing in the balance where one side is leaning all the way towards union leaders, and let's remember that union leaders are not always representative of the members of that union. And so driving growth for workers and small businesses, I think, is what somebody like Representative Chavez DeRaymer can do in that position if confirmed.
Absolutely. You bring up an interesting point on labor, and I just wanted to pull at that for a second. There's an interesting realignment happening in the country right now, especially on labor issues. You're seeing Republicans kind of openly courting rank and file union members, some more alignment on some of those issues. You've been involved in franchising for a long time, been working with these small business owners. Like, what do you think is driving that realignment and the alignment of the Republican Party being able to connect with these like rank and file union members and kind of labor participants?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity for Republicans to talk more about what they're doing to drive wage growth. And that is really whether you're a member of a union or not, you're looking for opportunities for advancement. And they should take credit for that. And I think they're starting to do that more with President-elect Trump, giving them the cover, in many ways to do that. And looking at the results of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and looking at the results of, a more sensible regulatory framework. So I would say that from a franchising perspective, the business model itself is not inherently anti-labor. It's actually something that we've seen is pro-worker from a standpoint of wage growth, benefits, higher rates of benefits, and wage growth in the franchise model than other non-franchise businesses that we've seen. And so some of the policies that we've fought over the last decade, I mentioned the joint employer rule earlier, there's been 4 different joint employer rules over the last 10 years. So the end result of that is friction in the relationship between the brand and the franchisee. None of that is helpful for the employees of that business. So we think putting an end to some of those regulations, so allowing small business owners to focus on growth, is going to be helpful for the workers in these businesses.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and just to have that stability of not dealing with those 4 different sort of programs and regimes, but focusing on growth that way is so important. We're about to hear from Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne. Looking forward to this new Congress. One thing that Congress could do to set up America's franchise businesses for success and for that economic growth, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, she's a great champion. I mentioned she's the chair of our Congressional Franchise Caucus with Congressman Gottheimer from New Jersey. Recognize franchises as the small businesses that they are. We're part of the solution. We want to be a resource to anybody in Congress and the administration, no matter the party, and we're part of the solution. So we appreciate the opportunity to partner with Semafor, have great champions like Congresswoman Van Duyne here, and if we could have more Congresswomen like Beth Van Duyne up here in Washington, I think the country would be better off.
That's great. Thanks so much, Matt, and thanks again to IFA for your partnership on today's event. I'm thrilled to welcome up Semafor Senior Washington Editor Alana Shore and Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne for our next conversation. Thanks, y'all.